There's a man by the name of Aaron Bastani from Novara Media. Now, I know that Novara Media often stand against in contravention to what I might describe as the right of politics. They are certainly a left-wing organisation, although in recent times Aaron has kind of drifted further away from what I would term more extreme left positions. I think he had a child recently, and that's kind of morphed his opinion, as it tends to do with adults. When you have a child, it does tend to crystallise more sensible opinions in a person. But what you're looking at here is the image that he presented, and it was a TV series called This Life, and it was around the late 90s that it was on. And I actually remember this series, and at the time I thought it was really good, and it was kind of all of these people were living this kind of yuppie lifestyle, and around that time it was seen as quite a cool way to be living your life. This was how people went on, and it was something that was kind of an aspiration for a lot of people, to be cool, to go and work at your professional job, to come home on a night time and, drink your wine and, get stoned and, lie around and watch TV and just generally just kind of, carp around about life and, having loose sex with people and all of this stuff. It was kind of, that was the feeling in our society. And I remember the 90s as quite a good time in my life. What Aaron says here is that the problem with centrist dad podcasters is that they think it's the same city, and I think this absolutely nails it, and it really did send me off on a kind of a little thought journey regarding Romanticism. And I was thinking about Romanticism and one of the flaws within human nature that does affect politics, because as humans we want things to be true. We want the reality with which we live to fit a certain narrative. And sometimes things change, and what we'll do as humans, we'll actually look away from it and pretend like it's not happening. And what's a good analogy for that? Well, you might have had a job before, and you might have liked the job, and then after a period of time a few things happen. They employ a bunch of nasty people, or something happens with their job or something like that. You could also analogize this to a kind of a failed marriage. That might be a better way to put it as well. Like something of that nature where everything goes wrong. And what you do is you don't look into the abyss. You don't look at it and you turn away from it. And what you do in your mind, you romanticize that it's actually still the past, and still things can be how they are. And I think this is really good lens to think about how people from the middle class, particularly in professional jobs, particularly, not yuppies, because we don't talk about yuppies anymore, but we can say a middle class professional person who's making, 35 to 50,000 pounds a year, a centrist, not extreme by any sense of the imagination, but they are coming up to middle age now, and they've probably moved out a little bit to the suburbs, and what they're doing is they're not living within the hellholes of the inner cities that a lot of us find ourselves in. The cities themselves, particularly places like London, aren't very nice places, and that's one of the reasons why tourism in London is currently dropping through the floor. I'm not going to cover the latest statistics in London, but it's looking very, very dodgy for places like London, places like Dublin, particularly hubs like Manchester, and the type of places where families used to kind of go for the weekend and walk around the cities and do stuff, because these cities aren't nice places. I don't know if you've been to London recently. I have, and I've walked around, and my spidey sense is on maximum alert all of the time, because you certainly get a feeling that it's not entirely 100% safe, not in any way. I get a far different feeling when I walk through Newcastle city centre, for instance. So if I walk through Newcastle, it's not the same as it used to be, but then again, cities are never completely safe in that respect. But when I walk around Newcastle, I feel comfortable. And perhaps that's got something to do with how I've grown up around the area. But certainly if you go down London, you are in a totally different mindset. And a lot of voters, what happens to them is, as we grow up and we gain more access to increased levels of wealth and funds as we come into middle age, what tends to happen is these people accumulate wealth and they'll move into a more leafy part of town. And so slightly bigger house, slightly nicer house, etc. And there is a huge amount of people who are in the 40 to 60-year-old bracket that are voters, that have political opinions which are centrist, and that hold to this romanticised version of how life used to be. And they still vote on those parallels because they don't want to turn round and face the truth. And what is the truth? The truth is our country is going through a transformation, and I'm not just talking, about the demographic changes to do with immigration. As one of my subscribers left a comment on one of my videos, he believes that in essence the British people, the people that we would class as, totally British, and I'm not talking about race at all as this person seemed to think I was. I don't care about race, I care about Britishness. And in that, our sense of ourselves has deteriorated. It's got worse. It's not the same as it was. We've lost something of who we are, and whether that's something to do with the erosion of Christianity or whatever it is, I don't know. It's very hard to put your finger on this. And David Starkey was talking about this recently, the topic of Britishness and how we need to find our courage, the courage to be ourselves, the courage to stand up and be the people who we can be and who we should be in the future. And in that, I believe there's hope. But outside of that, this post here from Aaron Bastani completely nails the Liberal Democrat voter in suburban leafy places who grew up in large cities who still want the romanticised version of Britain in the late 90s and perhaps early 90s to be true. But it's not true. This country needs a radical shake-up, not just of our belief systems. Potentially that's got to do with what are British values. Perhaps there's a little bit of Christianity thrown in there. Perhaps there's just a little bit of empire decay in there, which is natural to all empires. All empires fail, and, the sun has set on the British Empire quite a long time ago. So perhaps it's a little bit of that. But in terms of this post and that romanticised version, I believe that's a real thing. And I believe we all do that to one sense or another. And if we look deep within our hearts and within our souls, we would recognise that this is true. We all yearn for something, whether you're yearning for, the sleepy villages with the English roses, whether that's what you do, or whether it's a version of this professional lifestyle in the 90s, or whether it's, whatever it was in the 80s or noughties, however it is. Doesn't really matter. Romanticism is very, very dangerous. And the reason it's very, very dangerous is quite simple. Because when we look back with rose-coloured tinted spectacles, we become sentimental. And one of the most dangerous emotions a human being can ever feel is sentimentality. Because it's clinging to the past. It's a leech on the side of your psychology, and it brings you down and it takes you down. Sentimentality is for fools. Romanticised, ideological perceptions of our past are just a mirage. The 90s have gone, as have the noughties and the 10s. And Brexit broke the nation in effect. and we haven't really recovered from that, nor are we going to. And in essence, I thought this was a brilliant post because it sent me off thinking about all of this. But as a country, as a society, we need to get real. And we need to get real about ourselves. It's time to put our own house in order before we start slinging insults at other people. Even if those people deserve it, it doesn't matter. As a culture, as a British culture, we ourselves are failing, sadly. And it perhaps is time to stop looking outward and look inward and start to fix the problems that we've got at home. Anyway, thanks very much for your time.